Hey guys, it's me, Simon Comics, and the other day, the Go-To Geeks made a video about comics and how the war affected them, and I wanted to make a follow-up video. In the comments, I saw there were people talking about Simon and Kirby and Stan Lee and why they moved to DC, and they heard that Stan Lee snitched on them. Just want to make a video talking about that and addressing some of the things. And so I just want to mention this book. I cannot recommend it enough. This book is by Joe Simon himself and Jim Simon, his son. This book has so much information on it, in it. Beautiful colors, great printing. If you look inside, there's a bunch of information. The move to DC, Jack Kirby, Joe Simon, Alfred, Harvey, Carmine, just all these things, EC Comics and Fox Comics, everything, Fawcett, Captain Marvel, Superman, and it's just really good. I can't suggest it enough. So pick yourself up a copy of this. It's really good. So basically, if going to the very beginning, it all started with Joe Simon. Now with Joe Simon, if you guys don't know, that's what he looked like. This is a picture of him inking a page, smoking a cigar, and talking on the phone. So this is one of the most iconic photos of him. If you guys don't know, which I think everyone does, Joe Simon, right here, had the idea for Captain America. And he sketched the idea out and brought it to Martin Goodman, this sketch. This is a recreation of it. And he brought this idea to Martin Goodman. Martin Goodman said, okay, let's give it a shot. And Captain America was born. He said, you get 25% of the profits. With the 25%, you get to keep 15 because you created the character and you worked on it. And 10% goes to the people that you hired. He hired Al Avison, Jack Kirby, and a few others. And they were going to split the 10%. So I'll keep that in mind, the 25% agreement. So here we have Captain America, this sketch, and they turned that into this. So from that, they got this Captain America comics, and this is a bounded volume of reprints. This is issues 1 through 5. Then we have issues 6 through 10. And Joe and Jack left after issue 10. Somewhere around issue 5 or 6, the person who worked for Martin Goodman in Marvel told Joe and Jack, the person who writes the checks and tells you, oh, this is your money. And so he told him, Martin's, he's not giving you your fair share. You're supposed to get more than 25%. He's not telling you how much he's really making, and you're getting the short end of the stick. So Joe and Jack were like, what can we do? And they went to DC Comics, and they started to work on some titles. And they did this very low-key. During the breaks of their lunch, they would go to a hotel room where they had all the stuff laid out, and they would just work. And they were so happy there. However, Stan Lee, Martin Goodman's wife's nephew, was assigned to them by Martin Goodman. Martin said, Joe, give Stan Lee something to do. And when they were working on Captain America, Stan Lee would just sit in the corner, play his flute, annoy Jack Kirby, annoy Joe Simon. And he was basically there. Joe and Jack would be like, Stan, go get us some sandwiches. And he would also erase the pencil lines after they inked a page. And that was basically what Stan Lee did for the majority of the time that he was assigned to Joe and Jack. Now, keep in mind, Stan Lee liked to be involved in everything. Wherever Joe went, wherever Jack went, he wanted to go. And when they would go get their own lunch and they would go to the hotel room, work on the DC Comics, Stan Lee was like, well, what am I doing? And he wanted to do something. So one day, as Joe and Jack were leaving, he tagged along with them, and he said, just let me know what you guys are doing. What are you guys doing? Just let me know. What are you guys doing? And Jack, the story is Jack said, Joe, don't let him come. He's a little snitch. And Stan was just annoying them. And finally, to the point where Joe was like, and Joe and Jack were like, fine, come on, just let's go. Just be quiet. Stop annoying us. And Stan found out about them working for DC. And shortly after, at issue 10 of Captain America Comics, Martin Goodman found out. And they walked back in the Timely office right after lunch break, and all the people in the office were standing around the door looking at them. And they knew that they had been busted. Who snitched on them, we don't know. It's between Jack said that it was Stan Lee who snitched, because he's related to Martin. Joe thought that it might have been someone at DC trying to get a position at Marvel, which of course back then was called Timely. And I don't know, could you imagine just walking in and the whole team and everyone was just standing around there staring at them? And so they were fired, and they got fired / quit, and they fully went to DC Comics, where they did a lot of work that they really liked. Because Captain America, if you notice, Simon and Kirby, they jumped around a lot. Boy Explorers, Fighting American, then Stuntman, then this, then that, then this, then that. And they didn't stay at one title for too long. And because they were always creating new things, not like Kirby staying at Fantastic Four and Captain America for years. But they like to bounce around and get new things. So one title that they did, one very successful title that they did, was the Newsboy Legion, which appeared in Star Spangled Span Comics number 7. That was their first appearance. Another comic that they did was Boy Commandos, which first appeared in Detective Comics. And these both were huge, and they got their own line. Boy Commandos got their own series, and it went up to the top of the charts. All these comics that Simon and Kirby did for DC and with Captain America, they all went to number 1. And these were comics, the Newsboy Legion. And with this, of course, Martin Goodman must have been fuming, but he's the one who ripped Joe and Jack off first. No matter who snitched, and no matter what they did after, it was Martin Goodman who cheated them. If Martin hadn't cheated Joe and Jack of their paycheck, then my theory is that they wouldn't have left so early. Would they have left eventually? Probably. After maybe issue 50 or something. Probably. Because don't forget, that was Joe and Jack's first really big hit. And that was first Joe and Jack's, it was really their, I think that they would have stayed with it for a long time. And the fact that Martin cheated them is really not fair. And just, it's kind of a sad story. And then we have, like I said, Boy Commandos, another huge hit. I would really like to get a Boy Commandos comic. I don't. This is the bound volume from DC Comics. And so, they did all this, and another title that they did was Adventure Comics. Now, I have this comic bagged like 3 times. I am so careful with this comic. Adventure Comics, they took over the line in issue 72, 73, and they revamped the Sandman, and it went to the top of the charts. Simon and Kirby's work were all in the top of the charts. And if you see here, it says Sandman by Simon and Kirby. Now, their names to be featured on the front of the cover was the first time in comic book history where their names where anyone's names were on the comic book, on the cover of the comic. You never saw Superman and then it said by Siegel and Schuster. Only Simon and Kirby. And you see continually on their comics after that it always says Simon and Kirby, Simon and Kirby. If you look here, Boy Explorers, 1950s, Simon and Kirby's, and it wasn't them saying who the art was, because you know how the artist will sign Simon and Kirby, and they did sign down here, but for DC to put them in the title, that was comic history. And like I said, all the ones that they did went to the top of the charts. And of course, the war came. And when America entered into the war, they were asking people to sign up. Joe signed up. Right after Joe, Jack signed up. No, sorry. Joe signed up first. Then their friend Alfred Harvey, who you might know from Harvey Comics, one of his most famous comics, Richie Rich. Alfred Harvey signed up next. And last, Joe told Jack, because Jack wasn't that enthusiastic about signing up. Joe told Jack, you know what, you sign up, it's scary, but at least you might get to be, you kind of get to, maybe you can choose where you get sent to. And Jack just didn't sign up. Alfred signed up, Joe signed up first, and Jack later got drafted. And Joe came out of the war first, then Alfred did, and then Jack did. And after the war, they regrouped, and Simon and Kirby went to work for Harvey Comics. You'll look at a lot of the comics back here. A lot of them. These are all Simon and Kirby. All these comics are Simon and Kirby. And this is just a mere fraction of what they did. And if you look, Harvey, 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 Harvey. Oh no, that's not Harvey. Sorry. Harvey. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 comic books here by Harvey Comics. And 3 titles. And 4 titles. And right after the war, they did stay at Harvey. And they did go to Prize Comics Group, where they did Bullseye, Fighting American, Strange World of Your Dreams, and they did many more. They also did The Fly, Double Life, Private Strong after the war. But these are all after the war. And so I made this video to kind of address what was going on in the comments, to let you guys know what happened with the Stan Lee and Joe, Simon and Kirby. And most people do believe that it was actually Stan Lee who ratted them out, because right after they got ratted out, Stan Lee got Joe Simon's position as editor in Timely Comics. He edited everything, and he got the position, and many people speculate that he did that because he knew that he would get the position because there was no one else to fill it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but just make the judgment for yourself. It is the one that makes the most sense. But like I said, the comic book makers, I really cannot suggest this book enough. Memoir, Simon and Kirby, the war about Captain America between Timely, Jack, and Joe. Jack, just to give you a little insight, Joe was suing Marvel, it was called Marvel then, in 1968. In 1966. And 1966, Joe sued Marvel, and Jack was working for Marvel, doing various titles, Fantastic Four, Tales of Suspense, and he was doing various titles, and Martin Goodman called him in, and he said, Jack, Joe's suing us, and what, because Joe was trying to get Cap's rights back, and what Jack did not know is that he had 50% of the ownership to Cap, because Joe listed him as co-creator. Yes, he did draw the pages of Captain America, but Joe did too. Joe wrote them. Joe's the one who created Captain America in the first place. So whether him giving him co-creator status is right or wrong, that's a discussion for another day. But Martin called Jack into the office, and Jack was like, Martin said, here's what we'll do. You sign the copyrights over to us, and we'll give you work. We'll give you a lot of work. Now, this was right after, this was a few years after the Comic Book Code Authority. And when that happened, everyone in comics took a big hit. Simon and Kirby, they were the kings of comics. They were like comic gods, and they took a huge hit. Everyone did. Siegel and Schuster, everyone did. And I guess when they said, we'll give you more work, Jack was so terrified because he had a family to support. But so did Joe Simon. And he had a family to support, and he signed the rights over to Marvel. And he got work, and that's how you see Hulk, Fantastic Four. You see all these titles, and they mainly gave them... Martin Goodman basically blackmailed him and said, if you sign it over, we'll give you work. If you don't, then see you another day. And he signed the copyrights over for another 7 times until he passed. But he never got to, I believe, in the 80s before he passed, he wasn't working in comics anymore. 80s or 90s, right before he passed, he called up Joe and he apologized for signing over the rights. And he said he was very sorry, and was just very sorry, and they had a conversation. I don't know what the conversation was, but I know that he apologized and everything. And the thing is, if you read the comic book makers, in here it tells you the story about not just Simon and Kirby as comic book duo, but it tells you the story of family. And they were a family. Their children grew up together. They went to each other's houses, each other's studio. They were family, and they would go to each other's houses, barbecues, after school. And the thing is, and Joe really took care of Jack. Jack was easily taken advantage of, and because he wasn't a businessman, and neither was Joe. People often misunderstand Joe and say that he grew up, he went to college. He did not go to college. Actually, what had happened was he wanted to go into this college, but his family was too poor. And his friend wanted to get into that college too, but his friend couldn't really draw, and it was an art college. So Joe drew something, and the friend used it as his submission, and he got in. Now, he had the money to pay for the college. Joe didn't. So that's why he went into the newspapers and comics, because he didn't have enough money to go to college. And he wasn't a businessman, but he did take care of Jack. And the fact that Jack signed over the rights to Captain America and almost basically betrayed Joe. After Joe took such good care of him before the war, after the war, bring him in. Because when Joe brought in Jack to the comic book industry, Jack was basically a nobody. Joe had already had a big position at Fox Comics, and he was bigger than Jack in the comic book field, and he really brought him in and brought him to the A-lister status. And it just saddens me that they did so much work together. They were such a good family, and Jack just signed the rights over, and that was that. So, but like I said, if you want to read more about this and a lot more, the untold origin of Spider-Man and how Spider-Man was really created, and the original Spider-Man, hint, hint, it's by Joe Simon, check out this book. There was a Spider-Man in here. There's a really good story. It's called The Spider Son I Never Knew. Really sad story, but really good if you just pick this book up if you want to know a lot about the Golden Age and what happened before Superman and everything. Just pick this up. I'll link in the description. I'll put the link in case if you want to buy it. It's really good. I can't stress it enough. And I've gotten so much information out of this book. And so thanks so much for watching, and have a good day. Bye.